Welcome and thanks for joining me on Talk the Walk. I'm Sarah Wong. America and indeed most of the world are waiting to see what ultimately unfolds after a contentious U.S. presidential election that has been marked by legal efforts and allegations of electoral fraud. President Donald Trump is facing a tough path to retain the White House as his Democratic challenger Joe Biden nudged this edge ahead. Observers here are concerned about how a change of government could alter Washington's policy on China and its stance on Hong Kong. How will the outcome affect the most important diplomatic relationship of our time and the geopolitical landscape? Let's bring in David Firestein, President and CEO of the George H.W. Bush Foundation for U.S.-China Relations. Mr. Firestein, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Great to be here.
Just for the sake of argument, last year, Joe Biden, the Democratic challenger, dismissed China as a competitor and believes concerns that China could eventually surpass the U.S. as a world superpower are overstated. Of course, his comments drew blowback from both sides of the aisle. Now, President Trump has always labeled Biden as weak on China. So will a President Biden make China the biggest winner?
Well, first of all, I think Joe Biden has a long record in his long public career, public service career in dealing with China. So I don't think one has to really guess too much as to how Biden regards China as a senator, as vice president. He's been on the record for decades. I think that comment that you just cited is an example of kind of a window into Joe Biden's actual thinking on China. I think he regards, in his heart, I think he regards China as a competitor, but not as the enemy of the United States of America. And there's a really profound distinction between those two. And so he said that. He got some blowback, as you mentioned, politically. And that comment coming as it did in the context of a very highly charged environment in the United States when it comes to discourse about China, got him in some political hot water. He then kind of toughened his language over the course of the campaign subsequent to that. But I think what he said then is what he really believes. And I think that now that the election is behind us, the campaign is behind us, Joe Biden is going to be the next president of the United States. And I think you'll see him taking a more measured type of language in talking about China. Yes, China is a competitor. It is a formidable competitor to the United States, but it is not the enemy of the United States. And I think that distinction is what distinguishes Joe Biden's views toward China from President Trump's views.
Can you elaborate more on how President Trump's administration viewed China? Because President Trump personally emphasized his friendship with President Xi, but he also pursued some tough policies on China. Do President Trump also view China as a competitor or an enemy?
Well, it's a good question, and there are important semantic distinctions, but I think it depends on which tweet and which set of comments and which statement that you cite. There are things that President Trump has said about China and about Xi Jinping that are shockingly friendly, shockingly gracious, kind, warm. And then there are other things that he said that are just incredibly adversarial and provocative, even incendiary. Literally in the same day, you might get one of each or 10 of each of these types of comments. So I think that Trump has generally framed China as tantamount to an enemy or adversary of the United States. Those around him, I think, believe that China is an enemy of the United States. And a lot of the language that President Trump has used kind of affirms that perspective. I think it's a perspective that is rejected by the majority of the American people. Recently, the Pew Research Center in the United States, very authoritative public opinion polling company, polled the American people and found that 26% of the American people regard China as the enemy of our nation, but 74% do not. And so in terms of President Trump's views, I think there has been great inconsistency. He certainly has tried to market himself as someone who has been tough on China, but even there is a massive level of inconsistency and that public sense of sort of self-claimed sense of identity as the guy who's tough on China on the one hand, and actually a president who in certain respects has been shockingly soft on China in a number of regards, including human rights, for example, but also in the adoption of tariffs, which have hurt the United States far, far more than they've hurt China. And I think to the extent that Trump has lost this election, that to a degree, his failed China policies and his failed approach to China were one of the issues that this election was a referendum on.
We'll circle back to the tariffs and Trump administration's trade war with China. Now, I want to take a look to the Sino-US relations from the perspective of China. So this week, China released their new 5-year plan, which focused on technological independence and modernization, essentially. Do you see that as a message that Beijing sent to whoever the next U.S. president is, which emphasized, and is it like a shout out to whoever the next White House occupant is, that China has the technological and economic prowess to rival the U.S.?
Well, I think first and foremost, when China lays out a vision like this in the form of a 5-year plan, in the form of an important policy that they're rolling out, principally what matters most is the degree to which that policy advances the interests of China as defined by China. So I think the U.S. reaction or the world reaction to some of these policies is less important to Chinese policymakers than what these policies mean for the people of China and for China's growth and development. And I think that's the only metric that really matters to the Chinese leadership. So I don't necessarily read a 5-year plan or any other major policy initiative as a kind of statement to the United States. I think it's much more a function of this is where the leadership of China wants to go. I think aspiring to be a technology powerhouse in the world is certainly a legitimate aspiration for any country, presuming that the country in question is operating within international laws, international norms, and so on. But the aspiration itself is normal. It's an aspiration shared by many countries in the world. And I'm not surprised that China would lay out a vision in which it seeks to become a technology powerhouse or technology superpower in the world. I think what it should be to the United States is a reminder that what we can control is not necessarily what China does, but what we do. And I think it's incumbent upon us to up our game and to play the game as vigorously as we can and to compete and to seek to win in competition with everyone out there that's competing with the United States.
Right. I want to read you an editorial from the Global Times, which was published on November the 2nd. It says, the U.S.-China policy has awakened China once again. It has made us understand that we may be stuck on key technologies and we must make up for technological shortcomings. It has also convinced us that the U.S. will not accept China's rights and will do everything to suppress China. And the idea that a U.S. election may become a key point in China-U.S. relations is widely regarded as naive. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, there are a couple of different points there. I think to take the last point first, I don't think there is going to be a sea change overnight in the way that the United States approaches China for the most part when Joe Biden takes the oath of office as president in January of 2017. He will look at China differently than his predecessor. He's got a long public record that lays out his thinking about China. Yes, a political campaign is a political campaign. Rhetoric tends to become tougher and more political. But as president, I think Joe Biden will recognize that China is immensely important to the future of the United States. I think people in this country and people in China recognize that the reverse is also true. that the United States is immensely important to China, and that China, even now, 2.5 years after the trade war, the so-called trade war commenced, is still the third largest trading partner with the United States, with well over $500 billion a year in two-way trade. And so the issue, I think, for the incoming administration is how do we get the trade relationship right, not how do we end the trade relationship and decouple. So that's one point. I think the other point made in the Global Times editorial that you just cited is that there's obviously a sentiment in China that the United States has a problem with China rising to a place of importance commensurate with its heft and stature in the world. I don't think that's an unreasonable conclusion for Chinese to come to based on everything that the world has seen as to how the United States has dealt with China over the last couple of years. This administration, in its approach to China, I think has betrayed a great lack of confidence in the United States, one that's uncharacteristic of any administration of either party. And I think people in China have picked up on that. And I don't think it's unfair for them to conclude that the United States under this administration has a problem with the rise of China. But in this country, as we all understand, elections occur, elections have consequences. The consequence of this election is that Joe Biden is going to be the next president of the United States. And I think there will be some changes in policy. And over time, I think we will get to a somewhat better place. I'm not saying night and day. I'm not being naive about it because I think things have shifted in a pretty enduring way. But I think that we will get to a somewhat better place in a number of different respects in the relationship under the Biden administration.
Quick response, do you think Joe Biden's administration will take a more confident stance against China?
I think that the Biden administration will be more confident in America. And I think that's going to be the big difference that will seep into U.S. policy toward China. But fundamentally, with Joe Biden, I think you have someone that believes in America, that also believes in the concept of trade and in the construct of comparative advantage, and that believes what is true, what is in fact true, which is that tariffs are taxes and tariffs kill jobs in the United States. And he's going to get rid of them fairly soon after becoming president. And so I think that the United States will deal with China from a position of confidence, but at the same time, advance U.S. interests, which is the ultimate metric that any president has to be working with.
All right, let's take a short break here. We'll be right back.